But I will introduce Rebecca Mclean briefly. Rebecca and I go back nearly 30 years now, working together on, yeah, time goes by fast, but Rebecca is an amazingly accomplished researcher. I could go on forever about her, speaks, I don't know, half a dozen languages, including several from Africa. Has worked in Cameroon, Mali, Zanzibar, Madagascar. She's a researcher on the senior research staff for Center for International Forestry Research. She's at the I forget the place at PSU now, the National Policy Consensus Center. Yeah, geographer, anthropologist. We share an archaeological history. So Rebecca has graciously, and a UW alumni that are, yeah, PhD at University of Washington Forestry. So Rebecca has graciously offered to, at arm twisting, provide a synthesis of some key points and things that she's observed, and maybe talk a little bit about going forward. And I think we'll have a Q&A afterwards.
Thank you, Eric. I just want to thank Kent and all the others who organized this workshop. It's wonderful to see this type of an event. As Eric said, we've known each other for 30 years. We worked roughly 15 years doing non-timber forest products research, kind of the policy, social science end of things. And then suddenly the funding dried up. And so it's just wonderful to see that the government is now funding this type of work again in the Northwest. And I also want to say I was up in Canada, I think it was 2005 or so, and they were actually doing some big leaf maple syrup. So this is cool too, to see that it's continued to evolve. As Eric said, although my PhD is in forest management and engineering, I'm kind of an anthropologist. So I've been taking notes. You've probably seen me writing furiously in my notebook. And one of the things that I do is qualitative research, which usually involves, taking down people's words more or less as they say. So much of what I'm going to say is, in fact, what people have already said. So I want to just start out with some of the key themes that I kind of heard as the day went on. And also yesterday evening, I'll start with yesterday evening actually. So it's that issue of there's sort of this continuum of why people are involved in the big leaf maple sugaring, I don't know, business, or what do you want to call it, because it's not always business. And on one end, I think it was Neil said, I started this as a hobby and then I went commercial. And then he says, I'm still having a great time. When it stops being fun, I'll stop. So that's kind of an interesting point, It's got to be kind of fun. You have to enjoy what you're doing. And Mike said, it needs to be enjoyable because you're not doing it because you're making a lot of money. But you want it to be profitable, or at least so you're not losing too much. So I thought that's a very useful comment to make. You don't want to lose too much. And then Neil said, I've gotten far enough into this project to know that it can be commercial. So, okay, yeah, I started out, it's kind of fun, a little bit of a hobby. Okay, then you go into it as a commercial person. But I have other interests and I may scale back. So people come into it, they go maybe scale out a bit, and then depending on their interests, where they are in life, they may scale back. And then I'm not sure who said this, but I believe it was Eliza this morning. There's also a lot of value, even if it's not commercial. It's intrinsically valuable to connect people to nature. And so this gets into that idea of doing maple sugaring as a way of bringing people into the woods. And in her case, actually not just herself or her family, but a whole bunch of different people, children and adults too, into the woods. And also, as she said, it's a way to get into sugaring without paying a lot for it. So that's another issue, the amount of money that it takes to actually start it. And I was really struck because the non-timber forest products that I know the most about is wild mushrooms. It's what I did my dissertation on, wild mushroom harvesters actually. And you don't need a lot of money to go into being a commercial picker. You need a lot of money to do this. $10,000, $15,000, to me, that's a lot. So that's kind of an interesting way in which I think this sugaring business differs a little bit from a lot of the other non-timber forest products, things that one could do. So moving on, people said it's a struggle. It's a struggle. You have highs and you have lows. It's hard to plan. So this gets at the variability, and this is where it's something different from the East Coast maple, although I suspect that the sugar maple also has its highs and its lows. But it seems that our big leaf maple, has even more highs and more lows, and so it's even harder to plan for it. And one person said, each year is different. I'm still learning a lot. As I get more knowledge, I'm getting better at it. So stick with it. You'll learn more and you'll get better at it. So that's a good thing to take home as well. So how do you deal with the variability? People have raised a number of ways in which they've dealt with that. One person said, refrigeration makes all the difference. For the small producer, the only way you can do it is with refrigeration. And another person said, you need to buy the right equipment for your scale. We bought an evaporator that was too big, and we had to juggle a lot to make it work. So the technology is there. And one of the things that struck me was it seems like a lot of the technology, it actually was developed for another place. And so maybe over time, as people get more knowledge here, we'll get different types of technology that are going to be more appropriate for here. So another person, I believe it was Mike, said, you make your money in the woods. And there's always a leak somewhere. So you need to walk your line. So you need to be there. You can't just be in some office. You've got to be out there in the woods, making sure that things are happening the way that they need to be happening. And also, someone said cleanliness is important, even more so than on the East Coast. And so that's another way that this is different than it is from what's happening in Vermont and Quebec, for example. Um, so Eric pointed out, and I believe Neil has stressed this frequently, maple sugaring has some automation in the harvest, but there's still a lot of manual labor that goes into it. So it's a lot of work to do this. Moving on, we talked a bit about business viability and how you can go about losing less money. Um, and I liked what Mike had to say. He said, you need to work smarter and harder. Not just work smarter, but you got to work smarter and you have to work harder. You have to keep good records, spread out your fixed costs, and your costs go up if you don't do it right. Buy the expensive drill bit. I really like that. Buy the expensive drill bit. And then we moved into food safety regulations. So policy is, in fact, the area where I have a fair amount of expertise, although not in food safety. And I was not surprised to, to, to see that, shall we say, it wasn't really quite clear exactly which regulations were applicable to whom, and nor was it terribly clear where you needed to go to be able to figure out what the regulations are. But one person said, I believe, I don't know your name, but this guy over here, he said, we're going to really need more help in this topic. So I would say next workshop, perhaps, have, some more information about food regulations. And then the woman, Stephanie, yeah, she said something which I think is really, really important, that you need to engage with your legislature. You need to organize. So I can speak from the wild mushroom standpoint, where they went and made all sorts of regulations that were, shall we say, they were not very appropriate for either the social situation or the ecological situation. And you risk having the same thing if you don't organize and work on it right now to get standards and all set up in a way that actually makes sense, not for Vermont, but for here. And then let's see. Oh yes, then we were talking about the buying of sap, and I thought Mike made a very good point. He said, we have good relations with the people who sell us sap, but we should still have a contract. So that's an important issue too. The idea that yes, it's good to be trustful of others, but it's also good to have a contract. And also with respect to the buying of sap, someone said we need to learn the grading system. So again, I think people made that quite clear that that would be a wonderful topic to have for the next time round. And then I'm going to just end up with four things, kind of pathways forward, I guess you would call them. And one is advocacy, which would be to get the regulations that make sense for this industry in this place. And then also I want to follow up on what Devin had to say about the working together. That came through loud and clear all through the workshop. Knowledge sharing, really important. The work that OSU is doing, that WSU is doing, making those connections between scientists and between people on the ground, those are absolutely critical. The scientists can only do so much, and people on the ground, they really know a lot. So it's really important that those two come together. The models are only as good as the data that goes into them. So I think that's really been a great step forward that that's happening. And also the building of the peer-to-peer learning networks. That's definitely the way to learn is learning from people who are doing similar things. And they, make mistakes that other people made, maybe you won't have to make. It'd save you a lot of time and effort. And then the third thing I want to just touch on is this notion of perhaps trying to figure out how to do this regional niche development. In French, they would call it a terroir. So that particular place. I don't know what the wine people do here, but in France, the cheese people and the wine people, the particular places where the cheeses and the wines come from, each one has their own, its own terroir. And so they actually they can get extra money because they've got, that particular place. So Roquefort cheese, for example, if your cheese doesn't come from this place in France called Roquefort, you can't call it Roquefort. So Roquefort cheese is much more expensive than other cheeses like blue cheese, Danish blue cheese, that kind of thing. So I think that would be one thing to think about. How could that happen? And what would those regions look like here? I don't know what places those would be, but it's something worth thinking about. And then tying into that, and also something that Neil brought up, is the issue of he said it this way, take each piece of it and do something with it. So that's the portfolio approach. You don't have just one product, you have multiple products. And, trying to piece all those together. And then also because, maybe it was Devin mentioned it, doing the tourism thing, that can be part of it as well. So putting together not only multiple products, so a product portfolio, but also an activity portfolio, so that if you do want to make a commercial go of it in particular, that may make it possible for it to work out. And with that, I will end. And what we did want to do, I noticed that there was a lot of people who had questions, but there wasn't always a lot of time for other people to answer those questions. So I just thought I would throw it open, and you don't need to ask me the questions because I probably don't know any of the answers. But if people have questions, we thought it would be really helpful to end the session with answers to those questions. Or the second thing that might be useful, if people just wanted to, call out what they feel would be useful things for the next conference that's going to happen. Yeah, down there. Pardon? Filtering. He says filtering. Could you elaborate on that?
Versus just gravity filters, flat pan filters, and there may be 3 or 4 others out there. I'm not sure.
Okay, so he's mentioned various types of filters and saying that it would be very useful to have some discussion about those different types of filters. To me, what that says is something about equipment or, supplies of something about that. Yeah, we're beginning to think about, no, it's turning into a 3-day workshop or something. Okay, yeah. So she said propagation would be a really useful thing to have some discussion about, whether that's using what do you call the okay, whether to use the root sprouts and use those, or whether to do seedlings, that kind of thing. Yes. Could you say that again? Okay, pests and how that's going to affect the trees down the line. Yeah. Okay, suggestion to have breakout sessions where you would have a choice of different ones. You might have 3 or so, and then you could choose which of those you would prefer to go to. Yeah. So could you say that again? Ah, yeah. So he's talking about having a standard way to share data with each other. That actually raises a very interesting point. When Eric and I were doing the work on wild mushrooms, we were looking at what Finland was doing. And Finland has an interesting thing where they have it's not for wild mushrooms, but for berries, which are very important in Finnish culture. And they have, it's like a weather report, only it's a berry report. And when are the berries beginning to appear, and where are they at what times, and so people know where to go. It's a national thing in Finland. Yeah, so something like that. Yeah. Uh-huh. So how to incorporate diversity in so that a wider set of people can be involved? Yeah, okay, that's a very interesting topic. Yeah, that's a good one. Any others? Yeah. Ah, yeah, how is climate change going to affect all of this? Yeah, that's a really good one too. Yeah. So she's curious, and people can feel free to answer. What do people do with their used equipment? Yeah, chairs. Make chairs. Yeah, Eric.
I have one friend that's willing to take it, and I think it's just because she has 4 children, very small, with very busy hands.
So you're saying that if somebody,
I have way too much tubing to keep all of those kids busy.
okay, he has a friend who would take it, has children who need things to keep them busy. Eric?
I had an engineering team of students this year that worked on the recycling piece of it. So we now have 2 outlets in Oregon for recycling the tubing when that day comes. So we're going to put out some information on how they want it, like rolled or cut, how clean, and so on. And then Melanie, one of my students here, is working on some of the uses that you might be able to do, like craft, you know, beehives for mason bees. There's, you know, floor mats that people can stand on. I think that there's, the more we can reuse, the better. We don't want it to end up in the dump. There's already enough agricultural waste in the dump.
So Eric says that they've been working with some engineering students down at the University of Oregon State, I'm sorry, to do recycling of these materials.
We had a test site in the Bow River Valley, way over south of Forks, and it just didn't get very much staff, and there's not very many maple over there. And so we closed the plug this year after this season with nothing in mind. So we took all that tubing, and we cut it up into 3 to 5 foot lengths. I soaked it in a bleach solution in my bathtub, hung it up to dry. We packaged it all up in gallon bags, and we're giving it away at the thing tomorrow for people to go home and try tapping.
So Kent had a research site out near Forks that didn't have enough sap flow, and so they took all the tubing from there and have packaged it, cut it up, packaged it so that tomorrow people can that are interested in just trying tapping will have access to those. Yeah. Drip irrigation. Okay. Oh, that's a good idea. So giving the tubing to the city to stake trees, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Selling it to them. Yeah. They're back there. So that's a,
Like, for example, if you're an injection molding company and you injection mold a bunch of plastic parts, like all the screw that's the runners for that all just gets pulled off and thrown back into a chipper and goes right back into the machine to be rerun. I mean, they just reheat it, pressurize it, so there's potential to use recycle.
so again, it's Western Washington, you said?
Yeah.
So up in Bellingham, at Western Washington, there's a recycling program, plastics recycling program. Yeah. Yeah, there.
I got one more idea. You could weave it into a giant hammock and hang it between your trees and have a party when you're exhausted.
Okay, well, you could weave it into a giant hammock and put it in between your trees and rest there when you're tired. Yeah. Can't.
Change the topic here, but the point that I'd like to make sure we capture for future exploration is this idea of doing back to nature kind of trips or let people come to your property. I mean, I've got a friend in Hawaii who has a vanilla farm, and he makes a ton of money on tours, and people come and they eat lunch, and they get a whole menu that's all
Mm.
menu. Like we tried to do here with everything maple themed. I don't know if you knew, but the cookies, we had a bunch, and the chili was both maple. Tonight at dinner, we got maple glazed salmon. I just think it's such an area of opportunity. These people love that stuff, and they like to come and do it.
Are you saying there were big leaks in the cookies?
I said, what?
Kent was suggesting that we really focus in on thinking about the tour, the opportunities that there are with doing tours. And then he mentioned a place in Hawaii where they're doing vanilla and doing, so then they serve food that's got vanilla in it. And here we could do clearly a lot of different maple things. So that would be a super interesting approach. I believe you had a question or something.
I'm trying to put all of these ideas in some order, and I think we need to kind of develop a matrix. I mean, if you're standing up a whole industry, you have to think about everything. And so to develop a matrix and try to put all these pieces in that matrix and figure out, okay, where are the holes?
Mm-hmm.
And then the places that are filled, who knows that?
Yes.
Who is that expert?
Yeah.
So that we can disseminate some measure of order, because right now it's like the Wild West.
Exactly. Okay. So what she's suggesting is that we need to get some sort of order into thinking about what are the different things that could be done, and to develop a matrix so that we know, like, these types of activities, who's the expert in that, where are their gaps, for example, and how would we fill those? I would think that would be a role for extension. I don't know. I'm not an extension person. I see our extension person is, Patrick is saying he's got that. Okay, well, yeah, Kent. Oh, any other? Yeah, sure, Eliza.
Tours and events, I have family in Maine, and every March, they have Maine Maple Sunday. Every single farm that produces maple syrup that Sunday can have people come in, and we make a lot of money. I mean, sometimes that's their biggest day of sales. They do all kinds of value-added products and baked goods and tours of the sugar shack while they're boiling. But as we grow and have more producers, in addition to a conference and a festival and annual, it could be really great to have the map of where are all the maple producers in the Northwest, and on this Sunday every year, you can go visit their farms.
So what Eliza is suggesting, she says in Maine there's this place where they have Maple Festival, just one day, like a Maple Sunday, it's just one day, and they bring people in. Well, people come, and sorry, I lost it.
Yeah, and so could we do something like that in the Northwest, where we have a designated day every year where you can visit people at their production sites on their farms?
Right, so a designated day for visiting people at their production sites and on their farms. And she suggested perhaps it would be useful to have a map of where the different maple producers are. I don't know, what they're doing, what you're thinking of doing with the maple producers, but I do know that in Clark County, in Southwest Washington, they've been doing that with lavender farms. And I think some of the nut farms, like hazelnuts, not sure. Yeah. And Skagit has a tulip festival. Greg?
Yeah, just quick, off of your Institute of Environmental Education Center that we run here, the family tours on a number of weekends, so they might end up being like groups of 20 or so people that come through with their kids. Yeah, they see some of the sites, learn about camping, visit our sugar shack.
So Greg was saying that there's families that come here to the environmental science here and, get introduced to the sugar shack and all that. Yeah. Yeah.
We talk about connecting people to nature with licensing, and I think that it's important to have us think about different tracks of technology that are appropriate for different scales
Yes.
of producers.
Yes.
Because I think, when you have the different extension
So she's suggesting to have different types of technologies for different types of producers, and the extension manual would also, kind of deal with that. I will say, just to plug for myself, as I mentioned, I think yesterday, I'm working with Eric. Where I'm on his grant, and my role is to develop some landowner profiles and a topology of big leaf maple producers. And in fact, maybe some of that information could then go into that type of a manual. Can I do two more? Okay, you have not said anything, so. So she had two things. She mentioned one is that there are places in Oregon and Washington that like have Maple Valley, maple in their names, or where maples are important, and just getting awareness of the big leaf maple industry, so to speak. And then second was I forgot. Oh, the riparian, of course. Yeah. The riparian areas, and focusing on figuring out ways to make those areas profitable, particularly now since one can't harvest timber in them. You did not say anything either. So.
Okay, I'm not sure how to ask this question, but as a on the ground person and not a science person, are there are there or could there be little strips? Because I mean, obviously, okay, so obviously you look at your sap and it's like scurvy and nasty and you smell it and you dump it, obviously. Or you look at your lines and there's like nasty stuff going on. But there's still like a test strip to say, hey, you're at a bad level of bad bacteria or something.
There's glucose meter, and diabetic use, test sap. It should be sucrose. So sap in maple trees is 100% sucrose when it comes out of the tree, and bacteria needs to break it down into glucose. So the more glucose that's on the meter strip shows you how much.
So, so she was suggesting it would be important or helpful to have some way to measure the bacteria, whether the bacteria in the SCSI tubes, what level it was. And Mike is saying that in fact there is a way with diabetic, about diabetic meter, yeah.
So what's the perfect
Zero. Okay, I guess one last point here.
And what we do is pool our resources from different small woodland owners, which is what I think would work really great here, especially when Eric was saying about having the different varieties from different, areas and regions in Oregon and Washington. And so when we sell our little bundle of wood in new seasons or whatever, there's a little pictogram or a little whatever, this owner produced this wood and this is the history of their little farm. And we could do something like that where each producer puts their label on their bottle, but it goes through a central organization, and the New Seasons call up, says, hey, we need 15 bottles of syrup here, and somebody says, oh, I thought those 15 bottles were taken here. So that's a great way to pool resources.
So,
Maybe we could combine that with the Oregon Woodland Cooperative, because it's still a wood product.
so, sorry. Yeah, so she's suggesting perhaps develop a model similar to the Oregon Woodland Cooperative, or even perhaps combining with the Oregon Woodland Cooperative. I have to say I have worked a little bit with them in the distant past, and their firewood program is really cool. But you know, so you would have your logo or whatever on your bottles. The store like New Seasons or something would call and say, we need 15 bottles. They send it, through this collective organization, send it off. Okay, yeah, that's it. Thanks, everybody.